Did it kick me out? Is it my internet?
I don't know, but
Oh, no. Okay. Mine's usually great, so
It says
we'll
we're now
see.
streaming live on YouTube.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Hi, everyone.
All right. So welcome to Deck
Did it
the
kick me
Fall.
out? Is it my internet?
Welcome to Deck the Fall, everyone. We are here with Bree Hill, Sara Morgenthaler, and Sara Richardson. And I'm going to let Bree take it away.
So thank you both for taking the time to chat with me and to everybody that's watching. Okay, I have lots of questions and I can talk, so let's just get into it. First, though, do you want to introduce yourselves? Tell us what your new releases are.
Sure, yeah. I'm Sara Richardson, and I write high-altitude women's fiction and romance that encourages people to believe in love. So that's what I really, doesn't matter if I'm writing women's fiction or romance, I want to just bring about that happy ending, hopeful ending. So I always say that my whole purpose in writing is to help people believe in love. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sara Morgenthaler, and my newest release is Mistletoe and Mr. Right, and is part of my Moose Springs, Alaska series, which are a series of quirky, fun rom-coms set in Alaska, in this little town that hates tourists and is completely overrun by them, and hijinks ensue.
Okay. Now let's talk. How did you get into reading romance? So I didn't pick up my first romance until about a week before I was turning 30. So I feel like I'm kind of late to the game, but I'm always fascinated to hear from other romance readers or lovers of romance when they pick their first romance up. So, Sara Richardson, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So I didn't even know what a romance novel was when I was younger, but I was a total hopeful romantic. It didn't matter. When I was like probably in sixth grade, I had this notebook that I called the Book of Love. And I wrote down quotes and like happy love stories that I would hear about from people and stuff. And it was like my journal. And I just kept all this stuff. And I called it the Book of Love. It was my Book of Love journal. And, like I think early, I started reading, Sweet Valley High books. I don't know if you know what those are.
Yes, I love
Oh my
those.
gosh. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I loved those books. And they had great little romances in them. So that was probably my first kind of foray. And of course, then, I had the romance novels that I had to hide from my mom, especially Danielle Steele. I found hers very easy to find, like at the library and stuff. Oh, yeah, they were everywhere. So those are the ones I kind of gravitated toward because I could easily get them on my own without having to ask my mom. And so that's kind of how I started, and I just always had that. I always gravitated toward the happy endings and toward love stories. So that's kind of my first experience
Have
reading.
you went back and reread any Sweet Valley Highs? Like,
I have not, but I really want to.
What about you, Sara?
I'd actually completely forgotten about Sweet Valley High until you mentioned it right now. But yes, I read so many of those. Bree, I'm kind of like you. I didn't start reading romance until later. It was kind of one of those Goldilocks situations. Like I started off on sci-fi and fantasy. And even though I really, really loved sci-fi and fantasy growing up, I always got frustrated with the stories because they didn't have that romantic, they didn't have enough of the romance in it for me. And so I always found myself like gravitating to those storylines in the sci-fi fantasy stories. And then I shifted to reading YA because they were a little more romance heavy than sci-fi was, or at least the sci-fi I was reading. And then I found romance. So it was kind of, I went from sci-fi to YA to urban fantasy, paranormal, and then contemporary. So that was my path.
And now
there were a couple I read Yep, and now we're here.
And now you're here.
I do remember reading, yeah, like I read that Camden Summer by Laverne Spencer. I remember reading that when I was younger. And I remember reading Perfect by Judith McNaught. Those were like some of the first romances I read when I was younger.
I have a Laverne Spencer.
In general, I didn't start reading in the genre later.
Mm-hmm. I have oh gosh, now I'm blanking on the title, but I have a Laverne Spencer, and I ordered it obviously used offline, and it came. It's like falling apart, but I cherish it because I hear so many romance authors say that she's like one of their favorites. So I'm like even afraid to read it because I'm like, if I flip a couple pages, the whole cover of this book is gonna fall off.
And I don't know if I reread it now. It's been so long. I don't know if it pulled out, but I just remember that was I remember the guy broke out of jail and he kidnapped a girl. They fell in love anyways. And it was, I don't know. It's like has stayed in my head, that story.
Okay, let's talk about writing. So has writing, well, obviously, so Sara Richardson, you told us you kept your notebook, your love notebook. Has writing been something both of you were always passionate about? And at what point do you realize like, this is something I want to pursue?
For me, definitely. I was a very shy child, and so I had a hard time expressing my feelings. So my mom, when I was really young, she gave me a notebook and a pencil, and she's like, "You need to write down your feelings," because I had such a hard time talking about them. And that just opened a whole new world to me because I was like, I would start writing and everything would just flow out so easily. And so I wrote stories I mean, I still have them all on my wide ruled notebook paper, old notebooks and stuff full of crazy stories that I wrote when I was little. So it was always a dream of mine, but nobody can just go to college and then graduate and write a novel and make a lot of money and support yourself, right? It doesn't happen very often. So I did major in writing in college, and everyone was like, "Well, what are you going to do with that? There's nothing, writing, what?" And I was like, "I can do anything. If you can write, you can do anything." And so I did PR writing for a while and everything. And when my first son was born 14 years ago, then I was like, that's it. I'm going to stay home and I'm going to write a novel because I've always wanted to do it. So that's kind of how I found my way. That was my path, but it was always my dream since I was a little girl. I loved stories. I've always loved stories, loved to read, loved to write. So I credit my mother for helping me move in that direction.
Shout out to mom.
Shout out to my mom.
When you were doing your PR job and like going to school, was it always in the back of your mind, like, I'm doing what I love, but I'm not writing what I want to be writing?
Oh, for sure. Yes. I mean, PR, and I got a master's degree in journalism because I thought I might want to go that route. And then it quickly became apparent that I'm way too empathetic to be a journalist, and I cannot separate emotionally from stories. And so, but it was difficult because I was trained as a journalist. And so that's very high level, basic who, what, when, where, why, how writing, and you're not supposed to put emotion into it. So that was my biggest hurdle when I switched over to fiction. I wrote 5 novels that were really bad and really cut and dry before an editor told me once, like, "You're a great writer, you've got good mechanics and good flow, but there's no emotion in your stories." And I was like, "Oh, right, that's important." So then that's what I focused on. I went back and I focused on just how do authors bring that emotion in? And part of it is letting yourself be vulnerable too, which is hard. So
it sounds like you kind of almost like you went to school and kind of unlearned everything your mom wanted you to do when you were a kid, and then you had to like find it all again.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
Always.
Yep.
What about you, Sara?
Well, Okay, so I think it all goes back to Power Rangers because I was watching Power Rangers and they kicked my favorite Power Rangers off the show, and little young Sara was not happy with this. And so I started thinking up stories in my head of what I wish would have happened, Billy and Jason. But am I still here? So like when I was younger, I would just think up stories. By the time I hit high school, I was writing my own little stories when I should have been paying attention in class. And then it just kind of became stressful for me. I went to what I studied the sciences in school, and I would go home and I would write fiction for fun. But it was always just kind of this stress release hobby I did in the evenings and on weekends. And it wasn't really until about 4 years ago I tried to actually get published. And I had I had this like big chunk of time where I wrote and read every bit of fan fiction I could possibly find online. And so you're talking about, Sara, you're talking about changing how you write to writing books. When you write fan fiction, you can just write for as long as you want. Like if you want a 30,000 word chapter, you can have a 30,000 word chapter. You can't do that with with published romance novels. So there was a huge learning curve from from just writing for fun to trying to write for romance. But I think it was good because I think you have enough on working on the craft part of it.
Definitely. Okay, so book specific. So congratulations again to both of y'all for Home for the Holidays and Mistletoe and Mr. Right. So for Mistletoe and Mr. Right, I loved the small town Alaskan setting. And then I love the cozy mountain inn setting that we had in Home for the Holidays. And I think you both did a fantastic job writing the settings in your books. That's one of my favorite things about the book, about reading, is when you're transported somewhere else. And I love how Moose Springs was the place that finally felt like home for Lana. And then for the sisters, the inn is what brings them all back to Aunt Sassy. As authors, how important is writing the setting for you? And are there any specific steps you take to make sure the importance of the location comes across how you want it?
Yeah, I think for me, I love to be able to see a setting first. So far, all of my books have been set in mountain towns, and I'm a Colorado girl, so I do find excuses to travel up to the mountains as often as I can, because for me, I feel like the setting has to be almost another character in the story. It just adds that other element, especially with unique settings like Alaska or Colorado. There's just something so charming about a small mountain town. If you've never been to one, I highly recommend you go. Just, they have so much of their own unique personalities and characteristics. And that just plays a big part in my stories. In all of them, I've, written quite a few cowboy romances. And now when I wanted to kind of move into some women's fiction, I was like, but that setting still fascinates me. And it still brings in, these small towns with these really quirky characters. And I think one of my favorite things about it is the rustic setting. So a lot of times these small mountain communities, things happen and the community comes together because they're all they have, right? That's all they have. And, they get through challenges together and they have celebrations together. And my parents live in a small mountain town, much like the one, that I base my books on. It's just very, very community oriented. I think there's something in all of us that wants that and that loves that aspect of small town romance, especially, that feeling of belonging. This is somewhere to fit in. And then I'm telling you, I have met plenty of quirky people in these towns that make it into my books in some way or another. I never call them by their real name, but they're there because there's just, again, so much personality, and it's just this unique flavor that it can bring to the story. So I'm a big, like, go check out the setting in person if you can. And do all that kind of research. As a journalist, I love research too. So I try to do as much of that on the front end as I can.
What about you, Sara?
I totally agree with Sara about setting being its own character. And I think too, if you can pick a location that you can connect to, whether it's a place that you just love to be, or a place that you're scared to be, or going home to a place that's like where you used to grow up, or just some way that you can personally connect to where you're writing about, I think that in itself brings out a lot more details than if you just didn't have that connection to the place. When it came to Moose Springs, I was up in Alaska researching for a different book I was writing, and I fell in love with it. I love mountains, and there was just something about, I could easily live there. I would love to live there. My husband hates snow, so I probably won't live there, but I think, or maybe I'll drag him anyways. But I think that it helps when you love or just connected to whatever you're writing about.
It definitely shows. It definitely shows. My husband and I, we both got out of the Air Force like a year ago. And I kept saying before we decided to get out, I was like, can we please just get stationed in Alaska just once? But he's from New York and he's like, no, I'm done with the cold. I don't want to live in cold. And I'm like, we live in Texas. Like, we never get to see snow. Like, let's just give it kids. But he was not having. One thing you mentioned, Sara, was that your novel, Home for the Holidays, it does feel more women's fiction. Is that, and we are seeing a lot more romance authors writing more women's fiction, which is amazing. Is it, what made you decide to go that route? And is it intimidating, or is it intimidating at all? Or is it easy because they have so many similarities already?
I am a person who loves variety. I get bored very easily. And so I have so many ideas. You guys, I can't even, the hardest part for me about writing a book is actually like sticking it out through the whole year and doing all the editing and proofing, because I want to move on. Like, I'm done, So that's been my challenge. But, and I would write in any genre. I love to read anything and everything. But I think for me, the catalyst, I still love romance, and I'm still putting out romance too. I have 2 romances coming out next year along with the women's fiction sequel to this book. So I love doing both. It's fun for me on the romance side because you get to do the male perspective a little bit more, which is kind of fun to get into the guy's head. I like that part. But with women's fiction, I feel like it was definitely intimidating. And the hardest part was kind of having these 3 different storylines, but then finding a way to weave them in together, which, happens through the family connection there, with their aunt and with each other. And I think just delving a little bit deeper, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into some women's issues. And you can do some of that in romance. I still write a lot of, struggles in my romance novels. And I definitely have a heavy family presence and family connection emphasis in my romance novels too. But the difference is, you really kind of get more into each character's issues. And especially when you're managing 3 women, it was kind of a lot, to bring them all together at the end and kind of weave it together with a theme, which is kind of like reclaiming your dreams. That's kind of what the book is about, really. Like, how did I end up here? This is not where I thought I would be. And I think all of us have kind of asked that question a time or two, like, wait a minute, this is not exactly how I envision my life right now. And kind of the idea that it's just never too late. to take another step or a new path, and so so that's kind of, they're starting to do that in this book, and it was so much fun. I love to get into their heads a little bit more and delve into some of those issues. So yeah, it was a really fun, and it gives me just a little bit of a different different focus for a while, and then I go back to romance and love it, and then I go back to this and love it. So it's been fun. It's been really fun.
So my next question was actually about that. So we have the three sisters, Rose, Magnolia, and Dahlia.
Uh-huh.
And so, and like you can't help but like root for each one individually while also just being like, oh my gosh, they're together for the first time in a long time with
Yes.
their aunt, and what's going on with their aunt and their mom and their aunt's love story. So like the issue, because they gosh, each topic that they each had going on was just like, I felt it. So was it the issues that came to you first, or was it the sisters? Like, which came to you first? And then how did you balance like giving us enough attention with each character, and then also like reminding us like this is what they're here for? Because I felt like at the end of it, I was satisfied with each story and the way that it ended for all three of them, like being back together and the end. I was like, how did she do this? And it's not like a 500-page book.
I don't know. Thank my editor that it's not a 500-page book. I give all credit to my editor. Yeah, it was, it, I feel like I'm having a hard time even describing it. Each sister had to have her own journey. And I knew that. I knew I wanted to write a sister's book. So that was like, because I have a sister. She's my best friend in the whole world. And we spend a ton of time together. And we go, we go on trips together. And I can't imagine my life without my sister. So I was like, it would be so much fun to write a book about sisters who have been estranged, so they've been, and it's because life just takes us, he's adorable, by the way. So life takes us in different directions sometimes. So it's not like they had a big falling out between the three of them or something, but they were on different journeys, so they kind of each had drifted apart and drifted away. And like, like we all do, they took a lot on themselves, like independent. I can get through this. I can do this. I need to put on a good front for everyone. And I think I tend to do that a lot. So I really related with that. But in reality, it's not a weakness to need people. And so I knew that I wanted their story to be about learning how to be vulnerable and actually being honest about where you're at in life, right? Because it's just not something that we get to do very much. And they were each in a place with those decisions and with those issues they were facing that they needed somebody, they needed support and encouragement. And I hadn't, before I started the book, I hadn't decided, well, Magnolia is going to be struggling with fertility issues. I hadn't made that decision. But when I started kind of developing each character, I spent a lot of time on character development up front and just kind of putting a portrait together of this person and getting into even like Myers-Briggs types and passions in their life and convictions and memories. So they take on a life of their own. And so I was like, oh, Magnolia, she just really wants to be a mom. And so they just started revealing themselves to me. So I wouldn't say that I set out to make it issue driven fiction. It was more like, I have these characters, these three sisters, and their issues just started coming out as I started to kind of play with them and develop them a little bit more. So that's how it happened for me.
One of my favorite scenes with Magnolia specifically is when her husband's just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to try anymore. And I was like, I felt it. I felt where he was coming from. Like, it hurts me to see you go through this every time. It was perfect. I don't want to spoil it for anybody watching.
You try so hard to get it right. And, I think it is that you get to the point of like, what do you do? One person is like, no, I'm done. And then, and it's like your deepest desire. And so what do you do with that? How do you come through that? Those are the kinds of issues I like to deal with.
So for Sara M, so we have Lana Montgomery. She's your heroine. And I loved her. I messaged
Yay.
on Instagram today. I was like, this scene where she like calls the guy out for assaulting the girl is like classic. But she's so powerful, but she's so nice and kind, and like everybody's against her, and she's still just really sweet. She's not what you expect when you learn that the heroine is like a rich girl. What did you want us to take away from reading Lana's perspective?
Well, I think the first thing with Tourist Attraction, the book before this, was it was a very shy heroine. So I wanted a heroine that was a lot more larger than life than the first one was. And, it's fun to write somebody that's, got a bigger personality like that. But I also thought that, sometimes I really wanted to write a Christmas story where people were lonely. And, because sometimes the holidays they're the kind of sad time. People want to be with people that they love, and sometimes can't be, or sometimes they don't have, what they're hoping for at the holidays. And even though it's this time of joy, but also it's kind of this time of sadness. And what I really wanted to do was just take two characters that were very lonely people and let them have their happily ever after together. And part of that was because she was so successful at her job, and she was, very strong when it came to, work and her family, and I just loved writing her. But you have to kind of dig deeper to see that after the boardroom meeting is over, she's sitting in a room by herself. She's alone in a town that doesn't want her there. And that's a very lonely feeling. And I think a lot of women can relate to throwing all of themselves into their work. And then when it's done, it's not quite enough. Like, they want more than just the work satisfaction. And so that's where she's trying to fill that hole by finding just a place that she belongs, because she's always traveling, and that's how she fills this hole inside her heart, is to find a home that she loves. And I think that kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, where if you write a place where you love, and I wanted her to love Alaska the way I loved Alaska. And for her, it just kind of, it completed her to be there. So, and it's not I have to fall in love to be happy, but I have to be happy with myself where I'm at. That was what I was hoping for with her. Having a cute boy fall in love with her was also just like the bonus to that.
You could tell that like she really loved. Can you see me?
I can see you. Yeah, I couldn't hear you for a second.
Okay. Yeah, you could tell that she really loved, like, she was having so much fun. And then the moment that like that I realized like her and Rick come from very different worlds is when they leave Alaska. And I wasn't expecting them to leave Alaska. And so they're at the shindig. I don't want to spoil it because there might be people out there that haven't read it yet. But like, that's when I was like, oh, they are very different. And like, but even up to that point, I was like, she has not shown anything, like nothing about her says like that I'm not okay with the fact that we're different. Like you could tell she was like really into Rick, but Rick had dealt with his own stuff that like he didn't really, I don't think he believed that she would choose him. So I really loved it. I really loved it.
Thank you. It was fun to take him out of his comfort zone, because I think that was part of Rick's character, was he had made his schedule and his life and his work and the people around him, those were his comfort zones. And that was how he got through the day, even though he was very lonely. And so in meeting her, he had to push himself into situations where he wasn't as comfortable. And it kind of pulled him out of his shell. So even as he was giving her more stability and a way to just feel like she belonged, he was also being pulled out of this little, you know, I mean, at the beginning of the book, he's basically sitting on a couch with his nephew eating cereal. And if he hadn't met Lana, it would probably be 15 years from now, and he'd still be on the same couch with the same teenage, well, not teenager anymore, but, you know, talking to his cat and dressing up his little hedgehog in little Christmas outfits and not coming out of his shell. So I think they were good together. But taking him out of his world and putting him in hers, I was, as a writer, that's fun, because then you get to see, you know, how your characters are going to interact in a different situation.
Oh yeah. And he was doing fine until there's a conversation that is had, and then it's like, yes. Oh, now he's not so sure.
Yep.
It just was like, what is Sara doing? I did not expect for us to be here. I thought we were going to be here the whole time. So I loved it. I loved those.
Thank you. Thank you. I loved writing those two characters. I really did.
Yeah, and Rick was kind of shy, and Lana's like really outgoing. They just balanced each other really well. What inspired both of you to make both of these titles Christmas stories? And do you think there are any misconceptions of writing Christmas romances? They're my favorites to read, but I would assume that they're one of the hardest to write.
They can be hard to write just because it's like, you know how many Hallmark movies there are at Christmas, and you're like, I don't want to do the same thing that anyone else has done. So I think the challenge is trying to make them unique. I mean, a romance, we all know, is a happy ending, and it's going to be charming, and you're going to have snow probably in a Christmas romance. But I think the characters are what makes it unique. And so if you can really bring those characters and the settings to life, I think, I love Christmas. I mean, yeah, no, it's never too early for me to start Christmas. Just ask my family. I've already got some Christmas shopping done. I'm ready. Like, I love when fall hits. I start looking forward to Christmas, because I think it's just some of my best memories as a kid. And it's the time that my whole family gets together and we have these big, huge parties. It's, you know, I dedicated the book to my beloved aunties, because I have so many wonderful aunts and uncles and just a huge family. So I think when we looked at the timing for when the book was going to come out, I didn't really have a full idea yet. I knew I wanted to do the sisters, and they were each going to be at a crossroads in their life. And we were like, oh, Christmas is just the best time to bring them back together, because there's just something about that feeling of coming home for Christmas. Even, you know, I talk about in the book, it's not their home, like the inn. They haven't been there for years, but that's where some of their best memories were created, during Christmas time. And so I was like, oh yeah, we have to do it. Would be great to do it as a Christmas story. And you know, coming out in September, good timing, and it just it brought it all together in a more meaningful way, I think, telling the story in a Christmas setting. So
the city of Savannah is also mentioned in your book, and that's one of my favorite cities. How did that come to be in the book as well?
Well, I wanted them to be Southern, from, you know, one of the Southern states. And I've always loved Savannah. I just think it's a really charming, fun, very Southern, classy place. And so that's kind of what I wanted their background to be, especially, you know, Rose, because she was going to marry the very eligible Gregory bachelor. And you know, she was used, especially Rose was used to kind of more like high society type stuff, kind of fancy, you know, and like you were saying, it's so fun to take a character out of their natural habitat and put them somewhere else. You know, it adds another fun dimension to the story, I guess you could say. So yeah, I did want them to be from the South, and you know, that's their names are kind of reflective of that too. But then put them in this, you know, cold Arctic tundra kind of place for Christmas, because, you know, telling a Christmas story, you want the snow and the charming inn and the hot cocoa and the fireplace. And so, yeah, so that's kind of that's why I decided Christmas. I mean, I love Christmas. It wasn't just for me, though. It just made a lot of sense with the story. That's my story, and I'm sticking to
We thank you for the Christmas story.
it.
Sara, what about you? Did you know this one was going to be a Christmas romance?
I did, but I didn't realize it was going to be a full length.
Oh.
Maybe she'll pop back in. Let's see. We do have a question.
Did we lose her?
You don't see me?
There she is.
Am I
We
back?
could see you, but we couldn't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm not sure what you heard, so I'll say it. So I'll repeat. There was a snow penis on a mountainside.
That's literally how you start the book.
That's literally how I start the book, and that was my that was where the entire book came from, because she had a construction project. I thought, how funny would it be if that was the town's reaction was? Well, this is what we think their book. But it was, and I had a different idea for book 3 and 2, and what was book 2 now became book 3. So Easton's story, Enjoy the View, that actually was supposed to be book 2, and now it's book 3.
You have a specific question. Do you know how many books will be in the Moose Springs series? There are so many secondary characters PJ wants to read all about.
So I'm under contract for 3, and it's the 3 Tourist Attraction, Mistletoe and Mr. Right, and Enjoy the View. But I have ideas. So if any more do get picked up, I have lots of ideas of who I would write about. So I'd love to write about Ash. I'd love to write a story about her. I'd love to write a Diego story. That would be really fun.
Diego.
Grumpy Diego.
So grumpy.
I don't know why I like grumpy heroes. They're just, I don't know, they're fun because when they melt, they're just...
And we need Diego to melt.
We do. And I think we know who will make him melt.
PJ also asked, did you laugh as hard writing the squirrely dinner date scene? As hard as it?
Let me tell you about that, because when I was working on this book, I was staying at this, I won't say where it was because I don't want to get in trouble for saying anything negative about a very nice place. It was a nice place. But I was staying in one of the guest rooms in the main ranch house at this ranch. And it is literally what I described in that book, except for the squirrels. Like there was no taxidermy, possibly haunted squirrels in this place, but it was creepy, and I didn't last there very long. The next morning I was out, I was gone, and I'm like, that's in the book. So yes, I laughed quite a bit. Do you know, the part I laughed the most about though was they get into the one room and there's the solitary squirrel that's sitting in, it's this taxidermy squirrel sitting in like a night robe, just staring out the window. And I'm like, I would be horrified. There's no way. There's no way I'd stay. I'd run. So I'd take the chance in the winter storm.
Okay, that's kind of answers the next question I have. What's been the strangest, most random place an idea for a book has come to you?
Well, let's see. I was at a well, I don't know if that's a good enough one. I don't know if I have a good answer for this. Sarah, do you have a good one while I think?
I'm trying to think where a book idea has come. Is that the question? Where a book idea has come to us? Strange places that we've thought of a book idea? I feel like I get ideas everywhere, so there's no strange place for me to be randomly thinking of books to write. The other day I was in the car with my kids and we were parked and waiting for my husband. It was in the store. And I see these two dogs next to us in this car, and one is like this little pug with the smushed face, and one is a huge, I don't know, some kind of retriever mix, I think. And I just started making up stories about them and telling my kids, how they got together and where they were going to go in their car. I mean, it was, I just think like that. I think in stories. So I've had random ideas everywhere, on airplanes, in the shower, in the middle of the night. You name it, I've thought of a story there. Pretty much.
I know that the phrase, oh, sorry.
Aaron asked, did you find yourself listening to holiday music while writing your books? I know you said, Sarah, you were listening to some this summer while you were writing.
Oh yeah, that Mariah Carey song, All I Want for Christmas, is like permanently burned into my brain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I finished edits on this book after Christmas in January. And so I was still listening to Christmas music well into the new year. I was like, I just need it. It's, you want the inspiration and that kind of cozy Christmas feel. And the music is a very important part of that, for sure.
What is one item that you have to have within arm's reach whenever you sit down to write?
A fly swatter. Because there is nothing that is so frustrating as you're like, nope.
For me, it's my dog, or my baby girl, as everybody else knows her, Clover. She is, so I have two boys, 14 and 12 now, and they're just big. They got so big and they're taller than me. And so last year I got a puppy, a Cavapoo, so Cavalier Spaniel Poodle mix puppy. And she's only 15 pounds, full grown. And she's my baby girl. And so she sits on my lap, or she sits right up next to me, snuggled in. I have to have her with me when I write now. It's just, yeah, she helps so much.
Fly swatter and baby girl, the dog. Have y'all had any time to read for fun this year? And do you have any favorite books that you've read?
Reading has kept me going this year. I don't know. I'm sure we're all in the same boat, but it's like, yes, I've been reading as much as I possibly can with deadlines and everything. I read The Boyfriend Project recently. I don't know if you guys have read that. Really fun. We were talking about a kick-ass heroine. I mean, I love those kind of heroines. Really fun. I love reading anything by AJ Pine. She writes cowboy romance too. Awesome, fun books. So I've read some of hers. I read Love Lettering recently by Kate Claiborne. Have you guys read that? So good, so fun. Totally different kind of romance. Women's fiction-y romance kind of, but really, yeah, really fun, really different. Let's see, I'm reading Sara Geo right now. So I don't know if you know her, but she's women's fiction too. So I'm kind of all over the place with reading right now, but yeah, all of them have some hopeful, happy endings. So
yeah, I pretty much everything I've been on, like, I keep saying the same book, but it's just so good. You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. That's so good. That is so good. Let's see, Mouthful by Sierra Grissom. That's a NA book, new adult. It was really good. That was her debut. I read a book that's coming out, I think, in the next couple of weeks, called Rescue You by Alicia Whistler, and it's about rescue pit bulls and dealing with PTSD, and it's really, really good. Let's see, What else have I read? I'm reading a super cute book by Sara Richardson right now called
Oh,
Home for the
yes.
Holidays.
And I'm reading this one and it's so fun. I just needed a good, fun, happy, laughing read. It's perfect timing.
There's a lot of penises in the snow.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
mean,
That's what I needed right now.
I mean, in the Santa Moose.
I feel like if you're gonna write stuff like that, just lean all the way into it. Like if
Yes.
it's gonna be silly, just go big or go home.
Yes, totally.
So can you tell us a little bit? I know you're working on the follow-up to Home for the Holidays. Can y'all, before we get off of here, can you tell us anything about what you're working on next? When can we?
I can, yes, I can tell you enough without giving too much away, hopefully. So it's really, I've gotten a ton of questions about Sassy because everybody was just like, yes. So I was like, I'm sorry, Clover has decided to join.
She's so sweet. We can't hear you.
I can't hear her either. Oh.
We just got so excited about Clover that
I know.
She's so sweet.
Every time you guys start talking, my dog comes over here to try to figure out where the voices are coming from.
I hear these people.
Right? No.
I swear technology just is not on our side.
Aw.
Like we have to depend on it so much, but it's like,
right.
So iffy, it's so iffy.
Mm-hmm.
Anything now?
Yay!
Okay, yay. Clover broke it for a minute, but we're good. Anyway, okay, what was I saying? What's coming out? Oh, so Sassy's story. Everyone is dying to learn more about Sassy. And we're kind of like, what, does she have a love story? What's going on with what's going to happen with Sassy? So she does have a point of view in The Summer Sisters, which is coming out next July. So it's her point of view, Sassy's point of view, and Rose and Dahlia. Because Dahlia moves to the town, and Rose is really struggling to get the inn up and running again. So she's trying to bring it back to its glory days, and it's not going well at all. And it's kind of fun because it's, she's this Southern girl, kind of was in this, really high society life, and now she lives at this rundown inn in the mountains. So really fun. And Magnolia does make an appearance. So Magnolia is back in it too. But I felt like her story was the one that was the most kind of wrapped up at the end of Home for the Holidays, for sure. So I wanted to kind of explore. And for Sassy, their question is all kind of like, okay, so what now? And it's kind of the whole theme of it's never too late to reinvent yourself. Mm-hmm. So Sassy's story, she's turning 70 in this book, and it's like she has this blank slate in front of her. So it's really fun. She becomes mayor of the town, and it's great. Yeah, it's great. And there is romance, and yeah. So it's just kind of a fun continuation to kind of wrap up more for Sassy and Rose, and Dahlia a little bit with Ike too. So yes.
I loved it. I think Dahlia was probably my favorite sister. I just was like, Dahlia, if you don't tell him that like you have the kids, don't call me. I loved it. So seeing it come full circle for her.
Well, and I think, for a mom, that is the struggle, right? Yeah. Especially when you're divorced, but you want to create this wonderful childhood for your children still, and so you do everything you can, to still make that happen, even though your family looks different now, so it's kind of figuring out what does that look like now. And she just yeah, she has that mom's heart and she just wants to do everything for her kids. But at the same time, as we all understand, perfect timing, buddy. Hi.
Mhm.
Um, it's at the same time, it's like, but you do have a life too, and you will have, someday the kids, you can't rely on your kids to be your whole world anymore. And so how do you start kind of building a life for yourself in the midst of being a single mom too? That's a challenge. So yeah.
And so, whose book are we getting next from Moose Springs?
We are getting East. Yes. Nope,
Okay.
it's good because it's up on Amazon, the blurbs,
Okay.
and other stores too. It is Easton Lockett's story. It is my mountain climbing rom-com, and I love mountain climbing stories. Like, I will watch anything on TV about mountain climbing. So this was probably the most fun project I've ever worked on, was Enjoy the View. So that comes in January. And I did write a little short story about Graham and Zoe and Ulysses the Moose from Tourist Attraction. So it's available if anybody, it was available for people who pre-ordered Mistletoe Miss Pie, and I think through Saturday, so through tomorrow, you can still get access to it if you buy this week and then put your information in. So that was fun. Those two things. And then I have a secret project, but
Because it's a secret. Well, we will be waiting on it. I'm so excited. Thank you both for taking the time to chat with us today. Your books they came at the right time. I mean, we've been in this dumpster fire that we've been in now since like February, March, depending on where you are. And I mean, I chat with my girlfriends and we're just like, it's never too early for Christmas, especially in 2020. Like, we needed it. So thank you for the books. I can't wait to see what you have coming up next.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Where are you all? Are y'all Instagram? Do you do Twitter? You have Facebook groups, anything like that? Where can people follow you and keep up?
So I'm Instagram and Facebook mainly. I do pop into Twitter occasionally too when I remember. That's Instagram and Facebook are definitely the best for me if you want to join and see what's coming up next, for sure.
Instagram's the most for me. I go to Twitter a couple times a week, and I keep forgetting about Facebook. So like, I'll go there like once a week. So if you reply to me on anything in Facebook and I don't reply right away, I'm really sorry. I just forgot about Facebook.
Just give her some time.
I'll get there eventually.
All right. Well, thank you. Enjoy y'all's Friday nights.
Thank you.
Whoever's watching, if you have not read the books, please go read the books. Treat yourself to some fun Christmas stories. They're so good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're awesome, Bree. We love you.
Yes, very awesome.
Love you guys too.
All right.
Bye.